Welcome everybody to Women of FHSS. Today joining us, we have Julianne Gray. Julianne, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Doing so good. Thank you so much for joining us today. Julianne, we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's at Southern Utah University and then did my MBA at BYU. I worked in a variety of marketing roles. I worked for the Walt Disney Company. I worked for Walmart. I worked for Deseret Book. Right now, I work as the director of product marketing for a company called BGZ Brands. It's a consumer products company in the consumer electronics accessories industry. That's a mouthful, but our biggest products are phone protectors, screen protectors, and phone cases. I love what I do. I love and have a big passion for customers and how we can help, make products that are going to fill their needs. And so, yeah, I just love what I do. And I am married to Rex, and we have a very busy 4-year-old son, and we love to do a lot of different things, watch movies. We love to go down to Moab and go off-roading. We love to travel, all sorts of things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. What was it that drew you to the FHSS Initiative for Women?
Yeah, so I just feel like a lot of women maybe don't feel like they have models of a variety of life situations or different paths. And because I feel like my life is I don't think it's actually as non-traditional as I think it is. Because the more people I meet, I've done what a lot of other people do, but I wanted to be able to talk about my path so that women can see that it's possible and they can see that that's an option for them.
And I'm so glad you are, because I think you're right. Even in the presence of the people that I've met with already, I think that it's becoming a little more clear that this is actually a lot more traditional, right?
Right.
Working and having a family and dual career households and what that looks like. So, well, I wanted to kind of take a step into some of the questions that we identified today, and wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your faith and how your faith has played an active role in your decisions.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I just always knew I would have a career. I can't really say that I knew what my career was going to be, but that was always the plan for whatever reason. And when I got my patriarchal blessing, which is about age 16, it actually talks about me having a career in that blessing. So that was kind of a confirmation of something that I guess I had just innately known would be my path. And then to have that reflected was great. And all along, I've just always had, sought inspiration for what my next step should be, where I should go. And I feel like for me, a lot of times answers to prayers don't come like, here's the answer that you should have. It's really like, this is the only option. My job is to put as many options on the table, and then usually the right one will sort of float to the top. It's not always that way, but that was most of the time what I needed to do. And so I just really tried to use inspiration to figure out what options would be good ones and to try to put as many options on the table. And then I, put faith in that whatever was the right decision, that those would be the steps that I would take. So I can't say that I had like I said, a real clear idea of this is exactly what my career, this is what my life would be like. But I've always just tried to be prayerful about what the next step was and then not look too far in the future, because I think, a plan is honestly just a point from which to deviate, right? Like you can put a plan in place and then life is going to get in the way. And so not to say that you don't have a plan, but just always be willing to be flexible as circumstances dictate.
Well, it sounds like with your vibrant work history that there were, with all those options, it probably took a lot of time. It wasn't like, oh, and this one bubbled to the top within a week, right? It sounds like you had to work really hard to make that a huge part of this experience.
Yeah.
Be very intentional about how you were receiving inspiration and what that looked like.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was in my MBA, like I tried to apply for any job that seemed interesting. And I figured, and I really do truly believe this about myself, that I could be passionate about anything as long as I, understand the product. I mean, so I was like, I can do any job. I can be passionate about whatever it is. And so I just tried to put as many options on the table, and then knew that of the options that were available, that I would be able to just find the one that was the right fit. Now, when I finished my MBA, it was 2009, which was I was graduating in a really hard economic situation, which I'm sure some of the women that have graduated recently or about to graduate are maybe worried about. And I was really fortunate to have a full-time job. I only had one offer, but that was one more offer than a lot of other people that were in my class. And so I just thought, you know what, I am not sure that this is what I'm going to do for the next 30 years, but heck, I can do something for the next 1 to 2 years. I can do anything for a year. So I'm going to put my faith in this option, and I'm going to move forward. And then I will continue trying to put new options on the table and seeing whether I needed to continue on this path or whether I needed to make a turn somewhere along the way.
I really love that, because I feel like, as I've been listening to you, the takeaway that I'm getting from what you're talking about, especially when it comes to faith, is that the faith part of that exercise was actually taking the steps, right? And it's a lot easier to find employment when you're employed anyway. So even if it was something that you knew you would only have temporarily, it was exactly what you needed to do to kind of get out there and see what else was available to you. So looking back, what have been some of the benefits that you've received from your working experiences? I mean, it sounds to me like you started off kind of still not knowing, a little adventurous, I guess, and you leapt forward, and then you had these other remarkable experiences. So what have been some of the benefits that you've received from approaching it that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think by being kind of open to all possibilities, it opened up opportunities that I would not have been able to imagine. Like, I mean, never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that my first job out of college would be working for the Walt Disney Company. I mean, that was just like a dream job. And especially, I mean, speaking of bad economic times, I graduated the first time around in 2002, which was right after September 11th. I'm making myself sound really old by listing all of these years, but that was also a really hard time to be graduating. And so this opportunity came along, and again, it was like, well, it's an internship. It's 6 months. I can do anything for 6 months, and then we'll figure out what to do in 6 months. And fortunately, that turned into a full-time job. By being open to all those possibilities, that allowed the Lord to put opportunities and things in my path. I have always tried to not that you can't be choiceful or eliminate possibilities based on personal preferences. But another example is that when I started my MBA, people were like, oh, what companies are you looking at working for? And I was like, well, I'm open to anyone, but I definitely do not want to work for Walmart. Like, I literally said those words. And where did I end up getting my internship? And then I ended up going back full time. It was Walmart. And that was a really good lesson to me, that when I was applying for jobs, they were there doing internship interviews. And I was like, oh, it's good practice. Like, I don't have to take it even if I get it. I'm just gonna, go through it. And I ended up getting an internship offer and decided, again, I can do anything for 3 months. I'm gonna go see what this is like. And that opened up doors for me. So I think sometimes casting a wide net, and I know that's a lot more work, that's worked for me, but to just say, hey, I'm open to anything, and, please help illuminate the path forward based on, kind of the possibilities that are out there.
So just listening to this, I couldn't help but think I have a really hard time saying no to stuff. So what kind of boundaries would you suggest for someone? Because that net, it can get really, really wide, and then it can maybe be discouraging if no fish are coming into the net, what to use that analogy a little bit more. But what what do you suggest for those of us who have a hard time saying no?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes as women, like we will think so far ahead that we take ourselves out of the game. It's like, well, like with Walmart, oh, well, what if I get the job there? What if that means I move to Bentonville, Arkansas? Oh, I'm single. Like there's probably nobody to date there. Well, what does that mean for my life? And I get, further down the path, and that would have closed off and maybe made it so that I was close to that opportunity. And so I think when you mention boundaries, I think you have to look at core values, like, put as many, again, this has worked for me, but put as many possibilities on the table as possible. And then once those opportunities are open to you, like let's say you have, 2 or 3 job offers, then at that point you can start to say, well, what's the location that I want to live in? Where do I want my life to go? And again, maybe you do make a plan for 5 or 10 years down the road, but also don't make plans for a life that you don't have right now. Like you don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. And so make the best decision for where you are in your life right now. And I think if I had thought, oh, if I moved to Bentonville, Arkansas at age 29 to work for Walmart, I might have been like, oh, that's scary. And it was a little bit scary to move there, but decision. It was, to be honest, my only opportunity. And I was willing to lean into that. I ended up meeting my husband there. So, you can, find love in a crazy place. But if I had closed myself to that opportunity, I might not have ended up in that same place. So I know that's, I guess, a little bit repetitive. Hopefully that's making sense for someone, but I think you do need to put boundaries, but maybe not put boundaries until you actually have a choice about what to select from, rather than putting boundaries on yourself before that's even a possibility.
I love that, because I find that is something when I'm advising women in particular that we do. I do it as well. All these pre-decisions are made, and it said, well, and I have to remind them and remind myself even, that decision's not there to make yet. Don't take yourself out of the ring. I loved how you said, we look so far ahead that we end up taking ourselves out of the equation, and how sad for us that we do that to ourselves. And I think it happens more often than not. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of stepping back a little bit, what are some things that you did as a college student that helped open up these future opportunities for you? Did you work? Did you belong to clubs? Did you have leadership opportunities? Tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah. So, it's so cliche, but I just got super involved. I was in a lot of clubs. I tried to put myself in a position to have some leadership experience. To be honest, I just did a lot of stuff that I found really interesting. And, I probably overcommitted myself sometimes. I just was so busy. I did have an on-campus job, and that was great experience. I wasn't necessarily in marketing, but it gave money, and it did give me some people that I ended up having that job on campus. I know that's unusual, but for all 4 years. And so I had a great recommendation as I left school for someone that I had worked for a while, even if it wasn't in my specific area. So I don't know that what I did was that there was any magic to it, but I just, again, putting as many possibilities on the table. One of the things that I did that led to me having that opportunity at Disney was they had something called the Disney College Program. I know they recruit on BYU campus pretty heavily. So people have probably heard of that, but that was a semester off. And there were some of my friends that were like, that's silly to take a semester off to just go work at Disney. And I was like, this sounds amazing. I get to take a break from my classes and go work. And I wasn't doing marketing, but I was doing retail, which later in my life I've been when I worked at Walmart. And now in my current role, we're not a retailer, but we work very closely with retailers. So I've been able to draw on that experience even, 10, 15 years later. And because I did that experience during my sophomore year, as I was graduating, I applied for a professional internship that was in marketing that I would not have been eligible for had I not done that previous experience. So that to me, there, like, yes, I kind of had that plan in the future as part of it, but it also just sounded like a lot of fun. And so, not that your undergrad needs to be just about fun, but I kind of also was really focused on getting done as quickly as possible in 4 years. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but kind of when I got done, I was like, oh, maybe I should have taken a little bit more time, along the way. I was so focused on getting done as quickly as possible that I kind of thought, well, maybe there's some more life experiences that I should have had. Maybe I should have done a study abroad or something else, because, I had the next 50 years to work. And, I could have taken another 6 months and that wouldn't have changed the fact that I had 50 years to work in my career.
Oh, it's just so nice to hear advising that we typically try to give our students. There is this understanding that you should get through in a certain amount of time. And I love the observation of, I wish I maybe would have taken a little more time, because college is one of those experiences that you can, right? You can take more time, because once you start working, you're working.
You have two weeks. I mean, it was kind of like, why was I so anxious to get away? I'm working 50 weeks out of the year. I have 2 weeks of vacation. Like, I love to travel. Why didn't I, do that in a time when that was a little more socially acceptable to, not have commitments and to be able to travel and stuff. So
speaking of your career now, could you share with us some of the reasons why you have pursued a career? You told us a little bit about how you've been given divine inspiration to do so. But if you could share with us maybe some more reasons why you've pursued a career, and then the benefits that it brings for you as a result of you doing what it seems to me it has been a very line upon line, precept upon precept thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, like I said, I kind of had that gut feeling. I had that, some lines of my blessing that helped confirm that. But to be honest, I finished college. I got that job at Disney. I worked there. I moved back here to Utah to work for an advertising agency. I'm 24, 25, haven't met anyone. And it's like, well, now it seems like a good idea to go to graduate school. So that's when I went back to BYU to get my MBA. Okay, now I'm 29 and I'm graduating and I'm not married. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to lean into this career thing. So I don't want it to sound like I had no other options, but like for me, it was this thing that I felt like I was going to do, but I also didn't have another option. Like, I needed to be able to support myself. And I was willing to move to Bentonville, Arkansas, because I wanted to feel like that if I didn't get married, if it was 20 years down the road, that I didn't have any regrets. I wanted to feel like I took every opportunity and lived my life, and again, made the best decision for what my life was right in that moment. And that I would look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, I, lived in Arkansas for 5 years and I got to travel and do these things. And, if I did meet someone along the way, that also was just going to be additive to my life, that I wasn't just sitting around waiting. That's not to say that there weren't days when I, that was a little bit hard to be on my own, but I ended up not getting married until I was 33. And so, not to say that that's so old, but I would say past the age that a lot of women maybe expect or see a lot of other people getting married. And so that was a little bit harder to be in a location that's a little bit more isolated from a singles perspective. But again, tried to put as many options on the table and just lived my life. And again, to just be like, my career, it's not everything, but I'm going to lean into it and, take the opportunities that I can until I decide to make a different choice. What was really compelling for me was I was reading the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. It's a few years old now, but I remember her saying, like, the number one best choice of whether or not you're going to be successful in a career is who your partner is, because she said that who your partner is going to depend on whether or not you are able to work it out so that you are going to have the bandwidth to be able to also have a career. And I thought that was very interesting because it was about it being a partnership, that it isn't just all about one person. The second thing I learned from that book was, again, don't take yourself out of the game, or don't make decisions based on what you hope your life will be like in 5 years. Make decisions about what your life is like right now. And then later, if you decide to get married, if you decide to have a family, you can always make a different choice. Like, just because you're committed to your career now doesn't mean in 10 years that you can't step away from your career or go part-time. And what I found in my own career, and as well as talking to a lot of other women, is that and it ends up being actually giving you more options, that you will have more ability once you've proven yourself to have flexibility to go part-time, to come in and out of the workforce when you've already have that work experience. And that's not to say that staying home is the wrong decision. That is also a viable option that I know a lot of women choose. And I think it's wonderful that we are at a place where women can choose for themselves what's right for their family, whether it's the right thing to stay home or the right thing to work, or, you know, somewhere in between. But that we have all those options available to us, and that we can make the best decision for us.
And I love how it's so individual, you know,
Yes.
and that what that means and what that looks like for everybody is going to be different, and to support one another in that. I love your positive energy toward acknowledging all the different ways that that could be for different women. So I appreciate that acknowledgement. That's very kind. So speaking of support and partnership, what does that look like for you at home or at work? Do you find that you have to, is it a give and take? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I'm just going to be real, and that's that it requires a lot of support. You know, I think sometimes there's this idea that women can't have it all, and I think you can have it all, but that you're going to need to get support from other areas. So I actually wrote down a list of all the things that I need support in order to be able to juggle what we have in our household. I mean, my mom watches my son 3 days a week, and then we have another lady that watches him 2 days a week. So, you know, I wouldn't, if the only option was for me to be my son's full-time caregiver, that my career would not be an option. So it's great that I am fortunate to have a job that allows me to afford that childcare that enables me to be at work. I have another woman that helps clean my house because I have a demanding job, and sometimes that is not what I want to be doing when I get home. I want to spend time with my son rather than cleaning. And so I'm really fortunate that that's the support that I have. I use a meal service to help with meal planning because it is just too much for my brain to have to figure out what to get on the dinner table every night. And so that's another part of that support. And then, you know, my husband is a great support too. He's a great partner, and we try to have equal partnership. He's willing to do laundry and step in and all of those kinds of things. He also works full time. His job is a little, I don't want to say it's more flexible because mine is flexible, but anyway, he just is really willing to step up sometimes when I have a meeting and I don't have the ability to drop my son off, that he can drop him off instead. And so it takes a lot of coordination. And so I think we should be upfront and real about that you can have a great career that's fulfilling and that's making a difference in the world. And that's going to require support in some other areas, and that's completely okay. Like, there's no, you don't get a medal for doing it all on your own. I'm sure there are women that are doing it all on their own, but I can't. And so I think in order to set people up so they have a realistic expectation of what it looks like to have a career, that may require support or bringing in other resources to help keep that household running and make sure that everybody's getting what they need.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I just read this article, and it's an older article, but I just stumbled upon it recently, and it's from December 2014 from Harvard Business Review. And they essentially went back to all of their high achieving women alumni. And one of the things that they acknowledge in here is that when you can align your expectations, whether or not it's with your future partner or with different support people in your life, that actually contributes to this big question that we have right now, which is, are you leading a fulfilled life, right? Has your education helped you in attaining the kind of career and the career success that you're looking for? And it was just amazing to me that with all of the statistics and the data that they have, which by the way is just so vibrant and beautiful, that one of the things that was really powerful for me is that, you know, it's time for more candid conversations at home, at work, and on campus about how and why the paths of these high achieving women unfold so differently. And so I appreciate that you would bring that up, because I think that that's something that would be really helpful for our women who may be thinking that their life is going to look a certain way. And then when it doesn't, you know, being able to create situations for better communication, right? What does that look like? What can I do now so that when I have this conversation with a future partner, with a future spouse, with a future employer, that we can create expectations together, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember I attended a presentation when I was working at Walmart from one of the Walmart executives it was a BYU Management Society seminar. And he, was, SVP, had a very demanding career, in the world's largest retailer. So, you could, and, had church calling, the whole list of things. And he talked about the idea of balance. And he said, balance doesn't mean that everything is equal all the time. Balance is a constant, no pun intended, balancing act. And he said, so what that means is there are certain times of your life that may be out of balance. Like, so let's say you're going back to graduate school. Because you're during that period of time focused on school, that may mean that there are other parts of your life that you invest less in, right? Because you're investing more in this area. And, when you get into a new career, sometimes that first 6 months or a year, you're having to overinvest at work in order to prove yourself and make sure that everyone knows what you're capable of so that you get a little bit more flexibility. Said the important thing is that he was always counseling with his wife, or maybe it's for people who aren't married or single. It could be someone that's, a close friend or a parent or, even a mentor, that you're saying, okay, here's what's going on in my life. Are we out of balance? And he found at one point, he gave this example where he physically was just exhausted and he didn't think he could keep going. And he realized that one of the things he had let slide was his exercise. And that was really important to him. And you think if he was already physically exhausted, that adding exercise back in would only be one more thing to do. But he found the only time he could fit it in was to get up early in the morning and do it first thing before everyone else was up. But for him, he said, even though, again, every person is different, I really need my sleep, so this would not work for me. But he said getting up first thing, even though it meant a little bit less sleep, getting that exercise in meant it gave him more ability to do more in those other parts of his life. And he said there were times where, there was one part that was way out of balance, but it was okay as long as that was a temporary state, that then they were working to figure out, what do we need to do to get this back in a place that's a little bit more manageable. And so it wasn't about it being equal all the time. It was about managing all of those pieces and making sure that something that shouldn't be a priority is, you're making sure that the things that are important to you are the things that you're investing in, and that all of those things the priorities are being placed in the right areas, if that makes sense.
It almost seems like there's a certain amount of intentionality that has to happen, right?
Absolutely.
That when you're looking at, this balance, which by the way, I kind of don't believe that it's possible, but anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But I understand the concept, this idea of, when you are trying to balance, when you're trying to get on the same level and make sure that certain priorities are being met, that these things are happening intentionally, right? That it's not this accidental drop off of this over here or this accidental drop off. And so it does require that we know and acknowledge what those priorities are in order for that kind of, balancing act to happen.
Yeah, he even mentioned that that was a conversation he had to have with his boss when he was in our stake presidency. And he mentioned that when he got called into the stake presidency, he had to go into his boss, who was not a member of the church, and be like, hey, so I have this new calling. It's going to require a lot of time, but you know that I do my stuff, that I am dependable, and that no matter what, I'm going to make sure that I'm hitting my objectives. So that's not going to change, to reassure him that, even though there's going to be extra priority placed on this other thing, that's not going to come at the expense of these other things that are important. And that was a rebalancing act that he needed to have with his boss to make sure that the expectations were realistic on both sides.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, Julianne, as we're kind of wrapping everything up, is there anything else that you feel you want to leave with the students or other women who are watching this that will help them pursue whatever it is that they choose post-graduation?
Yeah, I'm just so passionate about, I've talked a lot about options, about women having options, and being willing to do something that feels uncomfortable, to just have more options out there, to do something that might feel scary. I had my very first year of college, someone that gave me this advice, and it's cliche, but it stayed with me. It was like, do one thing every day that scares you. And so when I would be really nervous to do something, and I still do this today, I'm like, okay, this is my one thing today. Like, I have to do one thing every day. So this thing is my one thing today that scares me. And then I don't have to do any more scary things. And so be willing to do something that maybe you haven't seen modeled. Be willing to put options on the table. And then also, like, I would love it if everyone's life turned out exactly as they want it. And that just isn't reality, right? Most of us, where we end up is a lot different than where we hope. And so I think it's better to have more options on the table and be prepared for a lot of possibilities and have a lot of options. Then it's better to have those options and not need them than to need those options and not have them, right? And so whether that is taking a promotion or moving to a new city or going back to school to get more education, or maybe that is to step away from your career, and that's to stay home for a reason, to make sure that you're not closing off possibilities, that you're always leaving those options open. I think our lives as women everyone, I guess, not just women, our lives will follow a variety of paths, but I think we sometimes think there's only one way to do things. And I think there's so many possibilities. And I think there's just so much more that we can do. And I think when we give Heavenly Father that canvas, if you will, of like, here's everything, and I'm open to taking any of them, and please, let me take the path that's going to help you be most useful, then I think that will ultimately end up in a life that you couldn't expect, with things that you couldn't imagine. And so, keep your options open. And I guess that's what I would advise people.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation today. I know I've personally been enlightened by what you said. A lot of what you've said feels like you've taken it from my personal journal. So thank you so much for your time today.
That's great. Thanks for having me. And I wish everyone the best as they are making these big life decisions. Oh, one more thing. It's not a permanent, like, you can, as I mentioned, make a decision that's for right now. And that doesn't mean you're committed for the next 50 years. So they say that most people will have 5 to 7 careers in their life, our generation. So you know what, like, pick what's right for right now, and then you can always change your mind, and then that's totally okay. So, don't feel like by making this decision that, that's affecting everything. There's always opportunities to change or make a switch. So.
I'm glad you threw that in. I think that's going to be really vital for a lot of people too. So, well, thank you again.
Okay, thank you.